What I do is part of my identity. I feel like I was born to do what I'm doing. I'm not doing this as a job at all.
Howdy, folks.
Good evening.
So we're here live at the gift shop, Conversations episode number 41 with a very special guest. Someone I'm really excited to have on. I'm not sure why it hasn't happened sooner, but it's happening now, so fuck it. Dale Becker, oldest collaborator in Los Angeles outside of Spider and Tony.
Do you mean the oldest person you work with, or the person you've been collaborating the longest with?
Longest, yes.
No, I knew the answer.
I know.
I was just fucking with you.
So you're the oldest, dude. Come on.
So early on in Spider's help in my development as an engineer, he thought it would behoove me to have a deep connection with a mastering engineer, and it was a very important part of the engineer's trajectory and relationship building. And it's been 10 years now, and you've probably mastered, I want to say 90. To be fair, but probably 95% of every mix that I've put out. And when it happens, when it doesn't happen, it's usually after a fight to make the attempt for it to happen. But a record has been booked for someone else, and then I struggle giving notes to get it to sound like I want it. Those other 5%. So honored to have you here.
Thank you.
Honored to be a friend of yours.
Feel the same.
Welcome.
Feel the same. Thank you, guys. So honored to be here, and I when the podcast started, I'm like, oh, it'd be cool to be on that podcast. So I'm glad I'm here.
Cool,
I didn't take it for granted. You guys are so like, I don't know. It's just this very highbrow sort of.
Okay, hold
scenario.
on. There is nothing cool about this podcast.
He didn't say cool. He said highbrow.
Oh, he did.
It's highbrow.
He started out with cool and went highbrow. There is
cool?
nothing cool
That's cool
about this podcast, and I don't know what highbrow even really means. My brows are now raised.
All night. I was thinking about something with Dale today. We were supposed to have Dale at the last conversation that never happened.
Oh,
the
yeah.
last live in person. I was going through some files for Graham, and I pulled up the Instagram post that I made for Dale and John Greenham.
John Greenham. Yeah. That was going to be the next
mastering panel.
That was going to be the mastering panel. Oh my God, the last event, because the last one we did have was Spider and Ruairi. And then, we were going to do a mastering conversation because the loudness war was coming into the conversation with streaming platforms, and we were all trying to assess it, understand it. And then Dale kind of understood the numbers, and we were, fuck the numbers. Now we're at a different place.
That's where I am.
Now we're at a different place with it. But at the time,
now we're
highbrow
about it.
Yeah.
I don't need numbers anymore.
I was actually going to try to make a joke in the beginning of this episode that I thought of earlier and then realized it's not that funny. So I'm going to not say the joke as intended, but my version of it is somewhere along the lines of two types of people you don't want at the same table as two mastering engineers. And we have two of them here. And for some reason, Michael and I plan to have two of them at the panel.
I was at Blake's place last week, and Blake Neely, composer, and Blake was introducing me to some other people and saying nice things about our collective ears, you and I, Spider, and something came up, the conversation went on, and I was just saying that I don't find hanging around with mastering engineers to be very fun, because they're mostly hung up on the wrong things, and that's not true of you.
Oh,
I always feel, I kind of feel like I'm the one who's hung up on the wrong things when I hang out with you. And I try not to be, but I'm always like, fuck it, making records is pretty good after a half an hour with Dale.
How does that guy not care about this?
No, it's a focus on the right things. It's a focus on the people and the enjoyment and the sort of privilege. Dave always kept me in check with that. He's like, man, we get to sit in a chair listen to records all day, get to talk to cool people, maybe go to shows occasionally. It's not a bad life.
No, it really isn't.
Yeah. But I'm always reminded that when I pop over to you or when we meet at a show or a trade show or whatever, you are focused on the right things. A lot of mastering engineers are not.
I've always thought, and I was thinking about this coming up to this podcast because I've been in situations this week that made me realize that so much of what we do is artfully not doing our jobs. Like we have a job and a specific set of things we're supposed to be doing and supposed to be care about. And oftentimes a client will come in or send an email and they'll just be like, "Don't do that." Like literally, they will tell you, "Don't do your job." Like, I don't want that. And then you have to figure out a way to artfully not care about the things we're trained to care about, and how do I do my job without doing the thing they're telling me not to do, which is doing, it's like, it's just crazy to think how flexible you have to be successful. And there are mastering engineers who I know and respect who are completely inflexible because they have a very clear view and they're very it's not opinionated. They just have deep feelings about the way things should be. And I think part of what helps me work with different kinds of people and largely what successes I've had has been attributed to is just being able to be like, okay, if me doing my job to the best of my ability doesn't matter to you, Mr. Client, then what does matter to you? And let me see if I can do that and also sneak in some improvements, So yeah, I appreciate that because I've had to learn. My dad came up in a classical mastering, not classical music, but like your standard mastering mindset. And so I learned all that. And then he was, gone working, and then I just kind of had to figure it out myself. So I didn't have to come up under someone, and I kind of had to figure out my own rules.
Yeah, that's something very unique about you. Your father was an engineer. He worked with Neil Diamond for many years, among other things, right? He's very, you were born to a veteran audio engineer, right? And when I tell the story of you, it often sounds like your mother gave birth to you in the mastering room, which may not be true. We don't need to know. But that to me is interesting because I don't know anyone else mastering who was sort of born into it. I think that's very interesting. Have you noticed differences among your peers? Like you got an early start, or the things sort of came naturally to you because you were just bathing in it, from the beginning?
Yeah, I think it had to do with it was like two tiers of development. There's like my mom who would play classical piano throughout my childhood, developed my ear in a very particular way. I can't pinpoint how. I just know it has a huge impact on how I listen musically. And then my dad being in the studio and working with all sorts of different people, and it just being, we used to live in Van Nuys, and he had a studio in the backyard, and I would go to bed as a 6-year-old hearing, because they didn't do a very good job of like isolation. So you just heard this boom, boom, and it was, and that's what I would fall asleep to, and just being around the studio and not being, they didn't really, when it came to the music that I wanted to listen to, I grew up listening to their kind of like 70s, like all sorts of stuff from like James Taylor to Seals and Crofts to, CSN, all these things. But then they would let me listen to whatever I wanted to listen to.
On the rig? On the mastering rig?
No, but I always had access to like better stuff, like my dad's old headphones or like his, and so I had better, I had his old CD Walkman, no anti-skip. So you had to hold it really, really,
nice. Yeah.
But
nobody that's listening knows what that means.
Yeah, exactly.
Buffering. Yeah.
But just being, they didn't really, a lot of parents are like really keeping their kids what they're listening to. They didn't really, I don't, the words
micromanage.
So I was like listening to, I don't know why, but like I had the Friday soundtrack.
Yeah, I had that too.
Yeah, my mom took away the Chronic. She took that one away probably for good reason.
Same, I found it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found it in their armoire.
But then also just all the alternative music. We've grown up listening to K-Rock, like, just all these different things. And I just loved all different kinds of music. But really what it came down to was the sound of the music. Like I was more drawn to the sound than to the music itself. So like, my wife always is like, "Oh, those are great lyrics." I'm like, "What are you talking about? Lyrics?" Like I'm drawn to the sound of the voice, the sound of the music, and not so much like the message of it per se.
Sure.
So I mean, they played a huge part in it. Just not censoring what I was listening to, and just the circumstances of how I was raised.
But why mastering versus mixing, recording? I know you record, you perform, you do a wide
produce.
Yeah, you kind of do it all, but professionally, and you get your reps in, and you have mastered the art of mastering. Why did you choose that at such a young age with this backstory?
Well, we did have a studio at one point, and it was like during that 2008
The financial collapse.
Yeah, the financial collapse, and it was like, I mean, it was actually before that I went full time into mastering. It was probably 2006 because we had a studio, and the studio business was really bad at that point. It was like all you could find were bands who wanted to pay $40 an hour, and we had this like 112 input Rembrandt console and like all this crazy stuff, all this crazy overhead, and we had an opportunity to. Our mastering business was going up, and our recording studio business it would come and go. And
How
it was
old
just
were you
stressful.
at this point?
I was early 20s.
Okay.
And so we made the decision to just jump in and do mastering, and we moved to Firehouse Recording in Pasadena. And
Missed that spot, RIP.
it was
I'm
glad.
what a hang getting to come there to Pasadena with Spider.
It was a nice place to be.
It was a nice place, but I found out it was a terrible room.
I
didn't know it at the time, but
Yeah.
because you just make do. But so I was mastering and I was producing at the time and doing whatever else, and I just came upon this like wisdom that you got to just do one thing. Like I wanted to be great at one thing, not like it was the beginning of that time period, like 2008, 2009, where people were really just starting to do everything themselves. And it was like, I didn't want to be relatively mediocre at a bunch of stuff. Like I wanted to be really great at one thing. So just one day I just like quit all production. And I was just like, I'm just going to do this. Like, this is going to be my one thing. There's even a book called The One Thing. It's about doing one thing. And
I
because
think Michael has it.
Yeah, it's just there's a power in choosing and committing. So that's what I did. It was a matter of circumstance, and a matter of choice, and I met Spider around that time, and I had been mastering for a couple of years, but he really gave me my first. I would say I had done a bunch of projects before them, but that was like the first one that felt super serious. Like that was a serious project.
Yeah,
it was serious.
Yeah,
like we really went in on that one. We stem mastered it, right?
I put you through a lot.
Wait, your first serious project was with Spider.
I didn't know this exactly.
Yeah.
When I called Bernie.
Yep.
And Dale picks up the phone. He's like, my dad's on tour with Neil, but why not give me a shot? We work together, and
You asked for the shot?
Yeah, and he said, I'll go to the mat and make it good for you. Yeah. And I was like,
still has
I'll
the same
do what
attitude.
it takes. Yeah, and it really impressed me, and I was like, let's go. And so it was a project I had recorded live with an engineer called Eric Greedy. He was a very capable and fast and good engineer. It was really fun to work with him. We recorded it at Stag Street with bunch of musicians. John Osman, my first time with John Osman on bass, and Dan Petty MD'd the thing, put the band together. Jimmy Anglin on drums. It was a good time. And then I did some guitar and we recorded some strings in India.
I remember that.
It was for Alexander Edinburgh was the artist.
Oh, was that record?
Yeah, I wrote it with Charlie Midnight and Alex. And then, and I mixed it. And I had a room at Henson at the time. It was Herb Albert's old listening room next to the tape library. And I mixed it up there, and I was sort of insecure about what I got. And Dale entertained all kinds of we really went in. I mean, we had you had that inner tube something, and we did some stems through there, and we got a lot of love out of that box, and also a lot of noise.
Oh yeah,
we at the ends of songs and shit. So we did a little surgery. We went in, and from then on, it was like, all right, Dale's my dude. I was like, great. I mean, I think at that point in your career, that was probably a good move. And I think at that point in what I was doing, I think it was a good move for us to sort of go in and experiment and spend that time. I mean, I don't recommend everyone do that throughout their career, but it was certainly set a precedent for our commitment. Yeah. We could get on the same page about art, about our work, and put everything aside and just try to make it great.
Yeah, it brings me to the thought that has been with me the last couple of years. I didn't know this then, but I feel like the big leaps in anyone's career has to do with choosing chaos correctly. Because either one of us could have been toxic people, and we'd have been miserable. You know what I mean? Through that whole thing. But there was this we kind of dove in together.
We were both curious about what it could be.
Yeah. And we had all this great, my dad's room at the time was like Analog City. So it was just we had anything we wanted.
Yeah.
It really turned out great. I remember sitting there at we had an album listening party. It was fancy.
Yeah. Up in the hills at Charlie Midnight's house in the hills. And everybody who worked on the record we invited and had dinner and sat and listened to the whole
and her
record.
husband was there.
There's a poem in there somewhere, and I'm reaching for it. Up in the hills.
Alex was married to Gary Oldman at the time.
Yeah.
And what a hang. That was
fun.
That was awesome.
So as much as nostalgia is it's a fascinating topic of discussion here. I'm curious, based on the opportunities, and the circumstance that you just went through that got you to mastering. I'm always curious, and I mean, Ruairi could also step in here too. It doesn't have to be an interview format, because I want you to join our conversation on a couple of topics that we've been mulling over in the past few weeks. But kind of one last direct question: Do you love mastering?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
As a young man that has come into this.
If I had become a Bitcoin millionaire, or whatever, or came in through money through some crazy thing, that I would literally be doing what I'm doing.
Love
now.
that.
I just love it. I love the part of. I feel like I fit well in that position. I like the grind. I forget the quote, but it has something to do with one of the secrets of doing well is to call your work play. And that's really not that difficult for me. And I consider myself very privileged to be able to have a job that I can be that passionate about. I mean, I just love it.
Yeah.
So
going back to something you said to me at coffee, and you brought up briefly here about people don't want you to do your job. I am, as a mix engineer, quite confused sometimes on what the mastering job is. Especially on a single. So when we were at coffee, you were talking about a project that, you see a big part of your role as a mastering engineer, as I would of my mastering engineer, any collaborator on that finishing sense. Then when you're listening to an entire album, whether it's mixed by one person, 6 people, that you want the flow of the record to sound cohesive, like from levels of verses to choruses, as we were talking about. Like, we don't want the chorus to be quieter than the verse on the song that the next verse is going to start louder. Than it's just,
yeah.
And you did this automation move recently on a project, and they said, no, I want every song to be as it was in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
What is the job of a mastering engineer now? If you're not allowed to do that, and you have 0.1 dB of headroom, maybe when something is clipped.
Well,
over to you.
Yeah, that was a difficult situation because people, and it's not just this project. This happens everywhere with many different things when it comes to mastering. People have these ideas, and these ideas are very strong. They're, whether it be don't touch the automation, we got the dynamics right. I mean, the guy didn't understand that, like, I'm working from unlimited mixes and the dynamics are going to be different anyway. It's just don't touch my dynamics, And in that case, you kind of, my reaction to it was to just kind of step back and check myself. In this particular case, I wasn't able to go back in and fix it. I made adjustments around that song to try to make it work, but I just had to respect and take the step back. And in the end, I dive into a project and I give it my all, and I just just put it all out there. And sometimes people just throw stuff out and don't respect it, and that's just part of the job. It's like you just kind of like step back and you're like, well, okay. And it honestly, in that situation, it turned out to be okay. Because we become so micro-focused in a project, every little thing becomes such a big detail, and it's like, I turned that verse down 0.5 dB on purpose. You know what I mean? Yeah. And just to step back and realize, like, they're the artist in this case is the one is the boss. And if it's really that bad, he'll find out and he'll call me, and that happens a lot too. You want this crazy change? Here you go. I'll never do it to where, like in this case, it wasn't that big of a deal. Like if it was really a big deal, I'd try to talk to the engineer who got me on the gig, or so, like try to start a conversation. Yeah. But in this case, it was me letting my ego take a back seat.
I mean, that's what you when you came and spoke in the PMC room at the ASCAP Expo 2 years ago with John and also Dennis Koziak and Ingmar and Josh about the making of the Khalid record, right? We had all three of you, Dennis, John, and you there, because Dennis recorded, John mixed with, co-mixed with Dennis, and then you mastered, right? And one of the things you brought up that I've carried with me since is, like, when people are young and they're feeling ambitious and they just want to get in the room and do the project and get the shot, it's like, you may have chops, but you have yet to develop the wisdom to know which battles to fight and which threads to pull on. I thought that was so interesting, and it seems like that's what you're getting at here.
Yeah, absolutely. It is which battles to fight and how to fight them. It's
and how to fight them.
It's a lot of times I've learned. We have all this like collective wisdom and these things we know, and one of the things that idea comes from is the idea that in a way, and I know this expresses kind of one polarity of a way of thinking, but the more knowledge we have, the more it causes us to doubt, because so it's like we just have to, in some case, kind of like really, really, really limit our thinking and limit how we see a situation. And that, so there's like the polarities of like wisdom and knowledge. It's like you got to live somewhere in the middle to make practical decisions, to get the project across the line. It's not about ideas. It's about it. I mean, it's about ideas in some senses. Like we have ideas, and then we have all these competing interests, and finding balance in these chaotic situations requires us to limit our thinking in a certain way to to move forward.
But don't you find that like when you do pick a battle that you're actually fighting for the artist?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, always.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I think if you're confrontational and like you're saying, you want to start a conversation, when people are adversarial in those moments, it doesn't feel like they're fighting for the artist. It feels like against. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a kind of like an art form, to be diplomatic and collaborative and non-adversarial while disagreeing, sometimes intensely.
Yeah. I think if people know that if they know you, I mean, someone can walk into a room and know whether you're for them or you're against them. And so if I can have whatever artists walk in the door and they know implicitly by the way I'm communicating, by how I'm a more servant, I try to be a kind of a servant-oriented, service-oriented business. They walk in the room. I'm not Mr. Big Shot mastering engineer that, I'm not
You don't sit them in a little chair while you sit up high.
No, you do this. No, I'm like, what can I do for you? Like, how can I make this? When they see that I'm trying to do the best for them, even if they might, I'll just say it this way. They will know that whatever I'm doing, it's not for me. Mm-hmm. It's not to fit them into. One of the things artists hates is when people try to fit them into a box, or when the label tells them something to do, or the R&R, this is their project, and they're like, F the label, F this. Yeah. And if you're telling me what to do, F you too. And then you just have this adversarial kind of thing. And people bring all this trauma from the whole project, with their mix engineer, with their engineer. It's all this trauma and all this hardship and everything that went into the project to get to where, and then they show up at my door, and it's like I want them to see me and go, this is the guy that's going to help me get my project over the line.
Yeah,
yeah. And if you're their friend and you convince them of that, like, you can have the hard conversations, or anything's possible at that point, So,
yeah.
I've been on this. I like the what battles to fight thing, right? So I've been talking about it out loud. I don't know if it's been ever on mic, but I'm really not into throwback sounding records, right? So recently I've been getting a lot of references as notes. Let's just take today. This actually happened in a session today on a really kind of unique sounding record. Needs to be more Nirvana. Let's take out the low end. Just like, okay, well, my pushback is, well, then you might as well just listen to Nirvana, because this isn't as good as Nirvana. And Nirvana, with more sub competing against the culture of hip hop, kind of taking over the top 40 and the pop sphere, that's how a record of that kind of innate soul of a aggressive guitar-driven punk record is going to stand up next to that. If you go too lean, it's going to sound dated, right? It's going to actually sound dated and a non. Again, the song isn't as good as "Smells Like Teen Spirit," right? So like, there's already that part, but that is a battle that I find worth fighting for. And if you can explain yourself, and you can get what you're talking about, get on that trust level of understanding that you're for the artist to have success, then you can bring up things like that, because it's not an easy thing to push back on, because you should just say, sure, you want less low end? That's the right answer because the artist says so. But that record won't hold up on playlists. Like, won't be in competition with, the next Her record, or the next Ariana record, or whoever's doing something with a fatter bottom end. And but I understand the reference point that you're giving me, but why does it have to sound like that, right? And that sounds like a battle worth fighting, because you're talking about the aesthetic of a record competing with other records next to it. Now, you can also push back against that and say, well, I'm not competing against that. I'm going to do my own thing. And then that's the trigger to my brain. It's like, really? Do your own thing and get 10,000 streams, when you could potentially get playlisted because it sounds just enough like these records, but the inception of the idea already has this heavy distorted guitar in it. That's not going to be lost by the bottom coming up and supporting it and feeling more modern. And like, I'm trying to find those moments, because I want to, I come at it very similar to you. Like, whatever, man, like whatever your record is, like let's make it the best thing. And every once in a while, I'm just like, no, that's wrong. It's not going to win. It's not going to win. But it's not out of ego because I want bottom end in my record. It's that this record sounds weak without it, and it doesn't sound enough like anything else and different than everything else to be in its own lane. And it's like you have to know those times too. And I'm trying to understand that level of confidence that at some point of establishing that trust and allowing the trauma to not affect the longevity of the piece of art that we're trying to create here too. Like put it out, it sounds like a not as good Nirvana, doesn't sound exciting to me. Like what sounds exciting to me is cool, those guitars are Nirvana, but this sounds like a record that like Black could have made or something. You know, like, oh, I understand that now. And it's just like, let's move it over here. And there's certain battles that need to be fought. And I feel like on a throwback tip, that's one of them, because a lot of records are coming out referencing a period of music that the positive side that I can feel is that we're now learning about older decades of music that kids maybe wouldn't have known through these records. But for those of us that know those records, you might as well just listen to those records. And I think it's a sonic thing, not a songwriting thing. I think there's new cadences and melody styles and arrangement styles that make things coming out now more unique than throwback records, and making them sound throwbacky brings your brain there instead of moving it all forward. Anyway, do you think about this at all? Like, when you're thinking about curves, you know.
Well,
sorry, that was long-winded.
No, I think about courage. Like courage is so important, like to be able to, because when you say no, you are potentially losing that job. You know, so it takes courage. You risk pissing people off and never hearing from them again, you know? So I commend the courage, because knowing when to be courageous, knowing when to say no, knowing when to push back on a client is like so important. But this all brings me back to that same, how do you artfully not do your job? Because your job, when people call you, they're like, John, I love the sound of Khalid's Better. Can you please make this sound like that? And then you make it sound like that. And they're like, oh.
It's so different.
Oh, like, you know, this has too much low end or whatever. And you're like, well, I made it sound like Khalid's Better. That is so much low end. You know?
No, this happened to me today. Yeah, actually, this happened to me today, like word for word.
But the art and the level to which you succeed is based on your ability to take someone beyond the limitations they've imposed in their own brains. I mean,
and the reason I even brought it up in this context is that I think when you get on a certain level emotionally and openly with people, you are then allowed to assert at the right moment and the right thing, because then there's a chance it'll go over well, right? Because I think of it as, if I don't say it and I'm feeling it that deeply, that I know, because it's very rare that I'm that confident in an idea, outside of just free flowing through a mix, because that's what I'm supposed to do. When I do that, it normally is met after the trust is built with, it's probably a reason he's saying that. And maybe that's not the right answer. Maybe I did not giving the full. Maybe there's a split the difference, right? That doesn't mean that my first version of it is right, but it's something worthy of bringing up and entering into the conversation. And if you can't have an open dialogue about the collaborative process, and like, why did you hire me to do anything? Like, maybe I should forfeit the project. Maybe the courage is a good way to put it. Maybe I shouldn't be on the project, because, well, then what am I doing? What are you doing if you can't automate a verse down to make the chorus feel bigger? I don't understand.
Yeah, I've kind of. There was a time period where people were, you get these seasons, and the season I was in was people just wanted everything to sound like the mix reference, like exactly like the mix reference, like to the point where I was like, well, I'm going to be like all the other mastering engineers and just take the loud mix and do a couple tweaks and run it through, like, because this is too hard. And then I decided, you know what? No, I'm going to continue to just put my heart out there. no matter how much it hurts every time, and do my best, you know? And it's not that my best is not, I'm not saying that the loud mix reference is wrong. It's just like, I hear things that I would like to improve. I want it to be reminiscent of the mix reference, but better, you know? And that takes a lot of work to rebuild someone's loud mix reference from the unlimited mix, and then take it to the next level, you know? And it's so there's the same thing in mastering there, and it's like you can take it too far, or you can take it, but I don't mind when someone's like, hey, we're really loving the EQ, but it's kind of messing up the kick transient in a way, or like, let's have a conversation about this. And then other times you just get your heart broken and they're like, this is totally wrong. We've decided to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you have to be, I decided I'm going to be okay with that. I'm not going to stop giving my 100% and playing it safe.
Yeah.
Just because
it doesn't please everyone.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to. It's like we're artists in a way, and not one person's slant on life is gonna fit all the, like there are mastering companies that fit, that can check all the boxes for anyone, and they are great at that, and I commend them for that, and they can do a lot of work, and they can, you know, work on a lot of different kinds of music with a lot of different people, but I'm not that. I'm gonna do my best, whatever that is, and then either you love it, either you have notes for me, or you fire me. Yeah. Like these are the three. I'm not gonna send you back your loud mix, you know, and add a dB of high end to say that I mastered it.
It's interesting that you use the term "fire me" as a third option. What does that mean?
It feels like you're getting fired. I mean, I am very emotional. Like when I work on something, I take it very personally. Even if it's not quote unquote good. Like if you know, I'm not the guy to like work less on something because I don't like it. Like I'm going to spend minimum 70 minutes to 90 minutes on something, and I'm going to put my all into it. And so when you have that that's vulnerability, that's investment. You know, sometimes you invest way beyond what you're getting paid for. And so it hurts when people, you know, crap all over your work or whatever. And so it feels like getting fired. And I've decided I don't want to, and I've had people ask me, what do you mean fired? Like they just didn't use your thing. And it's like, I maintain, I defend that, that's the level of seriousness that I bring to a project. And it might not look, we were talking about this the other day.
Hold on, show us your bicep with that. With that. What are you talking about?
Woo! This
is the level of seriousness I bring to a project.
Sorry. No, that's good. No, but it's just, I take it seriously, and when it doesn't work out, like there's no hard feelings. Like I take a step back, but I'm not saying it doesn't hurt. You know, if it doesn't hurt you that you lose a project, you're not taking it seriously enough.
Yeah, deadlift hurts.
Yeah, deadlift
you do all
hurts.
kinds of things that hurt for the benefit.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, it's like if people don't care that a project goes elsewhere and they don't care, it's I wonder whether they should have been on the project in the first place, because they're not bringing the level that it takes there's so much chaos, and there's so many unknowns and so many variables, personnel, limitations of the audio, limitations of the song. Like it's a wonder that anything ever gets done. And so for something to be finished and for it to be great, it's going to take a team taking it seriously and caring a lot to get something done that's great.
Yeah, I think that attachment, I think that level of attachment can be trained. So, you know, like a kind of stoic practice, wake up every morning, people will be assholes today. You know, things will go wrong.
Yeah.
And when they happen, you're like kind of, you know, you're ready for it. And it's like, you know, some small percentage of the time the gig will go elsewhere. And, you know, I started thinking, you know, and it's through our conversation that I started framing what an engineer does in a given session as a performance. right? So all the factors of performance come into play, how well you slept, all the stuff, right? All the things athletes care about, or any other kind of performer. And I never heard a lot of engineers talking that way when I was coming up, right? That was kind of a new framing for me. It's like, oh, you're actually performing. A mix is a kind of performance. And, I've been in the mastering with you. What you're doing is a kind of performance, right? And you're saying that you're surrendering to the record and letting it tell you everything that needs to happen, right? And so you're opening yourself, and
very much
you're allowing that vulnerable state, and then sometimes you get the quote unquote reward that propels you on to the next one, and sometimes you get smacked in the head.
Yeah.
If you were getting smacked in the head a high ratio, a high percentage of the time, maybe you'd be on to another career or something, right? But it happens rarely enough that that it's a good path to stay on for you. And so I think about like the attachment that's formed, the identification with one's own work, right? That sort of conflation between the yourself and your being and the work you're doing. That's the kind of thing you can train apart. There are meditation practices for that, and framing, and so I think if the enlightened mastering engineer would be one whom takes the smack in the head, and it's like, okay, it hurts for a minute, and it's not like a thing.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean?
And this is not to say that like I'm fully I don't mind being wrong. So I always, the smack in the head to me, I say, yeah, it hurts, or especially if you lose the job. But even like notes like, this is not what we were expecting. It's that note hurts, right? But immediately you train yourself to see that as to the benefit of the project. Well, maybe I was wrong, or maybe...
Well, that's respect for the client, isn't it? And their decisions, and their, especially artists, right?
Oh,
unless they're totally wrong, and then you can just be courageous and tell them no.
I rarely say the word no. It's more of an explanation of what something could be otherwise, than saying no, and always trying the idea. But I'm still kind of struck by the language of pain, hurt, and I'm like, there's a difference between taking something seriously and taking it personally. And I'm curious, on your end, do you see an end in sight to the idea of taking these things personally? Is that something you'd like to achieve, or are you just not even considering it as a possibility?
I like that question.
Or just accept it.
That's a good question.
Well, a lot of people might not see pain and these things. I always think of pain in terms of growth. I'm not talking like trauma pain. I'm talking about like every time
workout pain.
Yeah, workout pain.
Bicep pain.
Yeah, bicep pain. These, like, I endure the pain for the sake of becoming better. So it's like I almost embrace it when it comes because I know there's a process of pain and renewal and growth, pain and renewal and growth. And so sometimes you push too hard and the pain's a little bit too much to bear, you take a couple days off and then you're fine again. Sometimes you go too hard and that's fine. But like I submit myself to this process of growth, and it's almost like another word for it would be like weakness. There's like ancient wisdom that says like strength is perfected in weakness. And it's like, that's the vulnerable point. It's like being weak, being maybe allowing something to hurt. Like, because I submit myself to these things because I don't feel like people are going to get the best out of me unless I'm willing to endure hard things with them, to protect myself. Like, there's just not a lot of, I have other people to do that. Ryan, my business manager protects me. The people around me protect me because my personality, if I was out there on my own, I would be a mess. I would be taking $50 jobs for friends. I would be trying to help everyone out, and I would probably die. Like, that's my makeup. I would run myself into the ground. But these people have come alongside of me, probably sent by God, because he knows I would die without the right kind of help. My parents, my parents are constantly helping me. My wife even provides, when I go too far professionally and it's affecting our home, she's very transparent, and I can start to feel that sort of way. And so there's all these boundaries that other people help me with, because I'm, we'll call it, I'm vulnerable,
porous.
Yeah, and so I've learned to watch my life. I've learned to have these people and allow them. Like Ryan is the polar opposite in terms of boundaries, and it even makes people who are good with boundaries like feel like, man, this woman has boundaries, And I have my wife, and which is a balancing point, and my kids, and all these things, and it's like finding balance within all that is how I survive.
Okay, so you skirted around the question, and you've gave a really great points along the way, but you haven't answered the question of, do you see an end in sight to this? Because that doesn't seem like the best way forward if you need people to protect and keep you in check along the lines of the home and the balance, right? If maybe there was less pain or taking things personally rather than seriously, that the balance could simply exist and be found without the potential of deeper hurt because someone tells you they don't like your EQ curve, which is just on a grand scheme. Like we all love. This is the caveat here is we all love what we do deeply and couldn't imagine not doing what we do when it comes to music. But I'm finding myself, and I'm just a couple of years younger, so we're about the same age, doing my best to relieve myself of the personal, as well as injecting my artistry and interest in the song and wanting the song and the art to win. So these pains can either not exist or exist for like a brief moment, right? Because there hasn't been a benefit. The growth hasn't come from the pain. The growth has come from a failure or something not working out, but not existing for long periods of time in the pain. It's how fast can we get out of the pain onto the next thing, whether that's a dinner with a friend or partner, or onto the next song. I don't necessarily agree or think that pain needs to be in the existence of art, and I think that a lot of people will disagree with me in that great art comes from suffering. That's like a Picasso mechanism. It's like this. There's no good art without suffering. Like I don't subscribe to that, and I'm just pushing back against this because I don't see you as that type of person.
Well, I'm not trying to communicate that because I definitely don't dwell in the pain.
Yeah,
I think equally as the death rebirth cycle of pain and growth, like, is one polarity. On the other end, you have effortless mastery. But you don't live in that all the time. Like we just had an album that I would probably say is the most effortless thing we've
really
ever done.
Was.
Really the high, we were both operating at you mostly just operating at this super high level where I could tell you brought yourself, but it didn't cost you what it costs normally. Like you were just did your thing. It's like improg 2, improg 3. I'm like, man, these are low improg numbers. I turn the music on. I'm like, wow, this sounds great. I'm going to do boop, boop, boop. I make my 5% contribution. Client loves it.
A 14-song album was mixed and mastered in 9 days.
Yeah.
With everyone involved loving every aspect of it with very minimal notes. That's the epitome of what we do with zero pain.
So what I'm saying, I don't.
So we know it's possible, right?
Yeah.
So on one end of the spectrum, we know that's possible.
Yeah.
And the other is staying up for 72 hours straight on a single, and that also becoming a top 10 song. Like this, these can exist in parallel, but the common denominator of them is the fact that the song came out. None of the other things matter for the song to have come out. So the faster that neither of these matter, I just imagine the true existence and meaning of life will come to fruition.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Yeah, no, I just believe both. You need to be able to do both. You need to be able to do the 72-hour grind, and you need to be able to do the effortless mastery thing. And if you lose your ability to endure painful situations, like I know guys, we all know guys who get up to the top, who get up to the top of the mountain, and they lose their ability to feel pain. They lose their ability to get the painful note, to have words, certain kinds of words spoken to them, and they just, you get up to the top of the mountain, you become less sharp.
Maybe they're happier.
Maybe, and that's fine. Aspects. That's fine for them. But what I do is part of my identity. Like I feel like I was born to do what I'm doing. I'm not doing this as a job at all. Like I said, if I had $1 billion, I would still be doing what I'm doing.
Still sharpen the blade every day on this stone.
Yeah. Until I'm totally willing to think that I might be doing something different in a decade, but that will be the next thing that I'm doing, and I will do it with the same intensity and love. And if I can't do it with intensity and love, and if I can't go after it with my 100%, I'm honestly really not all that interested. Like I'm not interested in a desk job. I'm not. I mean, unless I can do that desk job, and that comes from a place of privilege. I mean, it really does, to not have to do a job like that. But I would love to think that if I had a sales job, if I worked at, and I'm sorry if anyone here works at like we'll pick like a job like this would be like if I worked at. I know a guy who works at Enterprise Rent-A-Van. And he is great at he runs like 3 Enterprise Rent-A-Vans. And I would want to think if I was in his shoes starting an Enterprise Rent-A-Van 20 years ago, like I would bring the same level of stuff to that.
You would.
And I would kill the Enterprise Rent-A-Van game. I would run that thing,
Look at your face. Of course you would kill it.
You would samurai that shit. No. But the thing you said about, do you see an end?
Yes.
Like this is the thing that's interesting to me. Like what it sounds to me, Dale, is you've accepted this about yourself, that sometimes you're disappointed when somebody goes somewhere else or doesn't dig your thing. And that's a kind of thing, that is like a kind of reckoning with what is likely to happen. It's like a pattern, right? It's a emotional fact. And it's not something you can control in the moment because it's a physical reaction to a stimulus, to an input.
Yep.
And the only thing one can do in the present about things like that, when we do take things personally, is to train in a way to de-energize it in the future so that next time it happens, the next 100 times it happens, that it sort of stings less and less and less and less. But it's never in the moment. Like to try to control it in the moment is to not accept that it's happening. It's like an avoidant denial, and then you start stacking that up. You start accumulating disappointment and potentially maladaptive responses to it.
I think you're right. But aren't there 2 layers here? I mean, we think of love, and at least by my understanding, where I'm at in my life, I don't think it's possible to love someone and not be open to being hurt. There is no safe loving. If you love, truly love, you can have your heart broken. There's a sword down an openness to loving that can and often does lead to being hurt. maybe many times over. And then there is the practice of getting notes and wanting to respond back with, like, because their mix was fucked up, or like they're wrong
defensive
in
stuff.
some way, defensive, you know, driven by insecurity or driven by an idea about what's right, despite the fact that they're, you know, what we've talked about or you talked about earlier. It's like what's right is kind of what they want, but you know, what's also right is something that can play and sound good. And so there's all that layer, but they're kind of two separate layers. And as I'm hearing both your points and Dale's point, and I just see a guy who's in love with records and how
and
things
willing
can
to
sound.
take the lumps.
And like a kind of a pure love. And that goes back to what I was saying at the top of the conversation. Because I sort of I have both feelings at times. There's times when I'm operating from a kind of a physiological or maybe insecure place where it's like, fuck this guy. I mean, this thing was a shit show coming in, and what's like, he has no idea where he's going with it anyway. What's he trying to do? And that's like, with that I'm like, do what Spider says. This is useless. Your thoughts here, your energy, this wound up at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday night on your way home to dinner. It's like, turn that off, damp that down, get better at turning that off. But not being in love with records, not being in love with the power of this thing. I mean, we're at episode 41. I think that's like what I've been doing at the table for 41 episodes, is being in love with the power of records and music. And so I don't know that you can ever, at that layer, I don't know that you can ever not be hurt, or ever not have your heart broken.
So the reason why I was so curious and kind of went in on it is because I couldn't relate more. But my life outside of the studio doesn't function while that goes on in my head, right? So I'll just stay. I'll just keep going. Like I've done it I'm 35. I've done that for 20 years. Maybe longer. Since I was 8 years old and got a saxophone, nothing else mattered. So that's my default mode, and that seems unrealistic to uphold for much longer. But I love it's love. It's true love of the art of music. But specifically like for you and I, because I think Ruairi comes at it somewhere where I wish I could come at it from. Still, it's really hard for me to be in love with music these days. But I'm in love with the sound of records. I'm in love with the possibility of what can be done in multi dimensions of audio. My life doesn't function well without that.
Let me abstract it one more layer, separate it out one more time.
Yes, please.
And maybe Michael can run with this better. But there's the general love affair we have with the power of music, what it's done in our lives, and we've talked lots at the table about that, how meaningful it is to us, how you were saying you don't know why your mom playing piano had this effect on you. It literally shaped the wiring. If we looked at the schematic of Dale, it is drawn by your mom's piano music. It is the layout of the wiring, the emotional triggers, how deeply you can feel a diminished chord or a minor ninth. That all went in at her feet. While she's playing. So your physiology, your whole brain is, I literally was looking at a Lisa Feldman note right when you sat down about how the power of different systems in our brains co-evolving, how that multiple systems are evolving at the same time in parallel around shared stimulus, and just how important that is. So there's the general love of music, but then each project is a kind of a mini love affair where you or a date or whatever, the analogy or the metaphor is going to break down badly, but where you sort of give your heart to a team or a producer or a writer or a record, and sometimes it gets broken. But if you're a lover, if you're someone who wants to live in the world open-hearted, then sometimes it's going to get broken. But where I end up with that is you should always be re-upping. You should always be checking that this is the best place for your heart. Because it might be that you should be running a pet shelter. You're not you, Dale. It might be that you should be the guy running that enterprise.
Yeah.
Because there's a wonderful clarity to his work. It's not you rent the van or you don't, or you rented the van and it broke down. Like there are these defined states. There is no, I rented this van and everything worked, but it just didn't feel great. It's like, that is not a conversation you're
having.
having.
I'm going to go with another one a day later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I guess I'm saying this thing of giving your heart to your work, if we generalize it out to design or further out to film or poetry or being an enterprise guy, you want to make sure that if you're going to live that way, if that's who you are, if that's how the wiring went in, that you open yourself to the right thing. And I think what I struggle with so much over the last 6 months, sort of if I think of our 41 episodes, there was this kind of big dip in the middle for me with my relationship to my work. And it is a series of bad dates, where you're like, well, what are we doing here? What is the point of this record that badly sounds like some other record, but it's poorly executed? You're full of fear, the whole thing is sort of mired in bad ideas, bad choices, insecurity. And you're kind of going, I'm going to give my heart to this. Now, I love music, so we're back to that layer. I love music. I love them. I know what it can be. And I'm looking at what you're doing, and it's a kind of perversion of the form. It actually maybe isn't even in the form. It's a kind of canvas where we're just dumping out copycat sort of adolescent simulacra, whatever. Yeah. So, and that's kind of heartbreaking when you want this bad date to be marriage material and it's not, Yeah.
And I hopefully, I mean, the idea, the hopeful idea in my brain is that as we progress, as we can provide more value with what we do through growth, that we have less of those situations where we're dealing with situations that I'll just put it out there, like certain projects are below certain engineers. Like some projects could be done perfectly well by a guy with headphones in his bedroom, and should be, like, and other projects. All I'm saying is that hopefully, as we get better, as we can provide more value, we have less of the projects that really we shouldn't be touching. It's like the economy, the universal economy of things. The better you get, the less. Because I still deal with projects like that every day, sure. But they're becoming it's less and less, and to John's point, it's the movement is away from the dealing with pain every day. It's not like I want to live there forever. I just never want to lose my sharpness. I never want to lose my ability to endure pain and grow. I never want to. I always want to be the guy that you can look at and go, he's going to get this job done. He's not thinks he's this big shot that is going to quit or hand it off to his assistant
or phone it in.
Yeah. Just because it gets hard and because I have. I just never want to lose that thing that so many people lose as they get more successful.
Yeah, they become cynical or there's a lack of kind of ethics.
Engagement there's a number of ways it can go. Well, but, John's been talking a lot about comfort zone and so there's a balance here, right? Like we kind of, I think we often bring up the 80-20 rule. It's like you spend 80% of your time, 80% of resources sort of conducting core business. It's sort of like not I would say it's like in your wheelhouse, right? In the comfort zone. And then 20% is dedicated to change. And that 20% of your time and your thinking and your energy and all of that that you've got dedicated to making upgrades, that's where you're willing to take the lumps. And knowing that pain is a part of growth, really finding that balance. Like some people can be unnecessarily suffering, so it can go too far in either direction. You can be I people who are afraid of becoming complacent, I've never really understood what this was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it never, the same way I don't understand what laziness is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think John's point was really interesting about this. Was it last week or the week before? We've been talking about it off mic too. It's like, it's okay to be good at what you do. Like it's okay for it not to be a Herculean lift to get a mix across the line. And if you're performing some heroic act every time, something's wrong, right? Something's wrong with this situation. Sometimes it should go well.
Well, because I would argue that you're getting sharper in the comfort zone because you're doing the
through
rep.
the routine.
Yeah. That's how I see it, at least.
There's value in the repetition, even when it's not like when even without feeling the burn.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I would say, I
this
agree.
This is the genius of physical therapy.
Exactly. It's slow movement.
It's
Precise
routine. It's going through motions. It's a more. That's how you get a Zen garden. It's a different mentality. It's slow and steady.
But the longevity aspects of it are unparalleled. That a deadlift can't give you.
Sure.
It's a full other side of the spectrum on the conversation. I think.
Yeah, I hate to be a meathead, but
be it.
In the gym, it very much is this. And if you come out of the gates too hot and you get really excited about CrossFit and you just start lifting too heavy, you have no longevity because you wreck your back.
Yeah.
You wreck yourself and then you quit and then you're
it's far too common.
It's far too common. But there is the reason we go and we work up to a 1 rep max. You do a 400-pound deadlift or something, and you train those heavy weights, those ones that really tax your nervous system, they tax you completely, is so the lower reps, when you're doing 225 during a regular workout and you're doing 55 of them, those lower weights don't feel as heavy. And
you're creating headroom.
Yes. Yeah, you're creating headroom. That's a great analogy. It is about longevity, and there are ways that if you're just constantly living in pain, and I didn't mean to misrepresent. That's not where I am.
I don't think I don't think you are. I like exploring this because I think about it. I'm trying to not feel pain and take things personally.
Yeah.
And I am a very openly vulnerable human that takes a lot of things very personally when it comes to what I send back.
Yeah.
Because I put myself on every record that I work on. I don't have a one size fits all. I put my shit on and I do it.
Yeah.
Because I think I hear music differently. So, it hurts.
Yeah. And even this conversation in itself is vulnerable because we don't even want people knowing this. I mean, I don't want...
Oh, I don't give a fuck.
The people listen... Well...
I don't give a fuck that people know
like,
that I work hard and put myself in their records.
All you listening, I don't want you to not want to send me a note because I don't want to hurt his feelings because he takes everything so seriously. I do...
No, notes are serious.
Send me the freaking hard notes. Challenge
exactly.
me, when I need to be
this
challenged.
record I brought up earlier about the Nirvana reference, the new mix that we finished today is way better than my first mix, but it wasn't better based on the note. It was better based on the moves that we made in collaboration and conversation. That note didn't get the record to be any better. I don't think we changed the guitars except for turn them up. That wasn't really every note. Actually, the same producer said that he was dropped some wisdom recently. He's also 20 years old and fascinating, and I'm very inspired by this gentleman. But he said every note given is right 50% of the time. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Or there's something about every note that it's either right or it needs to be attended to. Like there's something wrong about that thing.
Oh, right. It's down a path towards something, even if it isn't clear.
Yes, there's just something not right about something there. And a lot of the times for me, when I get a hard note, quote unquote, like you just said, the note isn't what it is.
Right.
Something else is in the way of the thing that someone's asking to be turned up or down or whatever. And that's our job. Our job is voodoo. we're supposed to read people's minds and get. Now, granted, obviously, sometimes the snare needs to be louder. So obviously, there's a note that could be concise and deliberate and understandable and translatable and finished, and the record could be done on improv 2 or 3. Like the record we just did was very basic. Turn the mandolin up, turn this up, whatever, but that's not always the case, and most of the time it's not the case, and those are our favorite notes, right? A lot of the time, for me at least, I would imagine those kind of notes are a little bit, the more obscure notes are harder in mastering because you have less flexibility and control over things. But if someone gives me a broad note about like the tilt of a record, it sounds too weighted, it sounds too heavy, like that's an easy fix for me because I could just tilt the thing, right? But specific elements. So the hard notes, bring it on. Bring the hard notes on. That makes records better. But you can tell in the way someone gives a note if you can just tell. I don't really know how to make something profound sound out of what a note, but you can tell when someone's trying to get something out of you that they know that you're capable of versus like just giving a note to give a note. There's a difference, and I love the hard notes, so I just wanted to piggyback off
hard
that.
Notes.
Yeah,
I think.
Wait, what do you mean?
Back to the little
what are you
shimmy
dancing
there.
over here?
I see Dale in a roaring 20s dress with the little.
Oh, we should.
Let's just stop right there.
No, on this note, we should just say that Dale, being one of the first guests in a while, he showed up to dinner before this, and though we had barbecue and poured a nice Riesling, he gifted us some lovely mezcal.
Yes,
so
indeed.
If we're shimmying left and right, let's just blame it on this really
mezcal
delicious
had a little
mezcal.
smoky heat.
Smoky.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch back on that complacency thing and what you were saying, Spider, about the sort of the fear of complacency. And I think for me, I have that fear, and I think it comes from being young and being in love with music and watching people who had lost it or maybe never had it, watching people who were deeply cynical. So if you've ever played in a band and you've ever gone to a city and you've played a show, you've met a sound engineer who's over it. Over you, over music, over people, over faders. He's fucking over it. And you were up there with your heart beating on a tray. Yeah. And you're saying, world, love me. We put a lot of work into these songs in a band room, and we're up from our small country town to the big city to play our show in the cool venue, supporting the cool band. And this guy is fucking over it. And you go, I never want to be that guy. I never want to be that guy. I will work at Enterprise or sweep streets or clean restrooms before I'll be that guy. Yeah. I won't stay in music. So I am deathly afraid.
But is that complacency? Is that what we
mean?
I
don't hear as the same thing.
Yeah, well, but that's, I mean...
sounds like
that sounds like bitter cynicism.
Yeah,
I don't...
Well, I mean... Yeah.
Well, because you can, hold on, I think what Spider's getting at, or at least my take on it, is you can be complacent and happy, or you can be complacent and bitter and cynical. And you can see it both ways, but it doesn't mean that what you're saying does not describe complacency.
Well, when you described successful people, names came to mind, people that I've spent time with or know of or heard stories about who have that same thing of like, either I'm too big to take your note, or I'm not even taking notes, we're not doing that, or whatever.
Oh, hold on. There's a, let me read the definition of complacent, because this is actually interesting.
Nice. This
is from the Oxford American Dictionary. Complacent.
A what?
I know.
Hold up.
I know. It's a study of how English is used in America, done by Oxford.
Okay.
Oxford Press.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks for the clarification.
So, showing smug, complacent, showing smug or uncritical satisfaction with oneself or one's achievements. So it's a way of not being critical of oneself.
Mm-hmm.
That's
slightly different. Yeah.
That's like your sort of like this smug sense of achievement. I find interesting. It's like, oh, I did this thing, and it's like you're sort of blind. You have blinders on to your weaknesses. That's an interesting.
So I wasn't. So when I was talking about this in the comfort zone, I didn't use that word. I used the word content.
Content is, I think, what I meant too.
That's the word that I was using, and not being afraid of content, and being content in what you do, because people are coming to you for it, right? And there's there's that comfort zone level of they're coming to you for a reason and you should give them what they're coming for. So that's all I meant about that. And there's reps that are done that like I feel better when I'm in my comfortable space. Right? That was my point is when I'm out of the studio doing something in another studio where the trackpad barely works, I am not doing my best. And when I'm in my space, in my comfort zone with my routine in the morning, I can mix 3 songs in a day and get them approved in a day or two. So this is just proof in the pudding there. Do I get sharper and push myself within that comfort zone? Every day I'm trying something new on a different type of sound. So I don't, that was the pushback.
I don't know that trackpads are a realm of comfort zone.
Oh yeah, I know.
That one wants to stress.
He does one session outside the thing and he can't let go of the trackpad. Well, I'm kidding. But just to steelman your point, I think, I don't think Dale has this at all from what I know of him. But what you're both driving at, I think, Spider and John, is look, Michael, we talked this week about a mutual friend client who we thought maybe was a little bit attached to the story of the pain, of the work, of that it must be a grind, that it must hurt, that it should be a kind of prison that you're locked in to come out with the diamond. It's like there's gotta be pressure before we get the thing, and it's like. Sometimes yes, but that isn't the whole thing. And being attached to that as a
narrative,
I can't stand that.
Yeah, that's dangerous, and it may not serve you in the end. So I think that's the sort of another way of saying what you guys are driving at is it doesn't always have to hurt, but I don't think that's how it is for you. It doesn't feel like that to me.
No, yeah, I can't stand. There are people I've encountered who make everything a living hell because they think that's the way that mastering has to be.
Well, that's the way they think life has to be. It's not even a specific
personality level.
Yeah.
For me, all this is it's all like if we speak in terms of movement, it's like I don't. When you say the word contentment, I see contentment as it has directionality. It is moving because the only thing that's not moving or changing is things that are dead.
Stagnation,
right? And
same thing.
Yeah, stagnation or complacency. Like there's kind of a death. It's kind of moving towards. It's not getting better. It's getting worse, and eventually things that continue to get worse die. And so it's like contentment has its own. If we speak about your what did you say? We were talking about trackpad and you said your comfortable space or
the comfort zone?
Comfort zone. Your comfort zone, that very much can have movement, and you can be content, but you can always be more content. Like, how can it get better than this? Well, there's a momentum towards you becoming more and more happy. There's no I guess we can achieve like total happiness, but it's always fleeting. So there's always kind of like that chase, and there's always movement attached, and that's what I always want to be moving. I always want to be growing. I don't want to be dying. I want to be. Although that's going to be a part. We're all sort of doing that, but while we're here, we're always pushing forward. We're always. I don't want to arrive. There's no end game here.
Yeah.
There's no. Yeah. Even if I retire. Like, even if there's this point where I don't do this anymore and it's like my twilight years and I'm traveling, I'm going after the traveling. Like I'm going to move until I die. Like, and I'm going to continue to go after it. Like, I'm going to be passionate about things, even if if I collect coins when I'm 80, like my grandpa, like I'm going to collect those coins. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just all these things. It's just a matter of.
You're going to collect, hard copies of crypto tokens.
Yes,
you're gonna make 3D printed versions of and collect them.
Exactly. It's just a matter of like when I think of complacency, or what's the word you used? Because I have no memory.
Contentment.
No other word for complacency. Cynicism. Like cynicism has no. I don't want it to register. I sat through one of the things that this comes from is in my early years as a mastering engineer, I worked with a lot of older engineers.
Sure.
And I don't want to tell those stories.
Yeah.
No.
I don't want to be the one to tell those stories and be the guy who only has stories of the past, like, or how great things were, or how terrible things are now, or how things aren't right now. Like, things freaking change, and if you don't change with them and adapt, it's another. The movement is another form of like adaptation. We're constantly adapting to remain relevant. And yeah, there might not be a point in which we're relevant. We'll come out of this industry and become relevant somewhere else. And like, because we that's part of becoming and belonging to the world around you. So,
well, my aspirations are to retire and just watch Netflix on my comfy sofa when I'm in my twilight years. So you go travel and let me know how it goes. I want to aspire to be lazy.
We'll watch Dale's travel show.
Yeah.
You're going to be one of those guys that get brought out of retirement, though. You're going to have like powerful clients. You're like, get John. It'll be like Mission Impossible. You'll have the
ear implants.
Yeah. John, get back here. We need you.
It'll be the algorithm, the Prince algorithm.
And I'll have a really tough rider for them. They'll have to show up with Krug champagne and
oh boy,
fucking sorry.
It'll be
Swiss coffee beans. Sorry.
Swish coffee beans.
Swish.
So no, I was thinking about comfort zone and the opposite on the spectrum, talking about like the personality type that constantly wants to create chaos because that's what they think the world needs to be. And I'm thinking about traveling tomorrow and you know, I make a trackpad joke about being in another studio versus my own, but it's really like anywhere out of my home or my comfort zone that we've all spent kind of 6 years creating this space kind of together, honestly. I'm bringing that to the hotel. Like I'm bringing, you know, you don't need to know what I'm bringing, but like I curate the espresso to be, I know that the place has good espresso when it comes. Like I still need my routine. I know that there's a sofa that I can meditate on. Like that's just how I think about these things. And that's going to make me, we've talked about this in earlier episodes where you push back against me on the idea that you're your best self at all times. And I was like, no, that's not, I know that I can be better than other times. Like I've seen myself excel in moments, and not to say that what I didn't learn from that conversation is we should be around people that obviously accept us at our worst, because that is the best that we have to offer in that moment. And I get that in a grand scheme. Yeah. But me setting up this 5-day trip, I want to be my best self on that trip. So I'm going to put myself in the best place to do that.
That's by taking care of yourself.
Taking care, but that's exactly it. But a lot of people don't take care of themselves on a fundamental level. So when things hit the fan, shit hits the fan, and it's chaotic, they start floundering because they don't understand how to get back to the comfort zone, how to get back to, oh, I can stand here. I have ground to stand on. It might be small. It might be a little island, like you're in a Mario game, and the pipe is like in the middle of the blue, and like you don't want to fall off the blue, but that pipe is there, and the pipe is real. And that pipe might transport you to somewhere else. Sometimes they're not transportable. You have to fucking jump and bungee across. Like, yeah, thank you. But you know what I mean? Like that. There's that feeling of aloneness, and it's kind of like a sanctuary that in that safe space. And I think that everyone needs to be able to find that in order to exist in the chaos. And so yeah, I don't know. It's something I think about a lot, clearly.
So. Oh, go ahead, Spider. We've dwelt on how fucked up you are and how really toxic your relationship is with your work.
Your attachment to
this self-flagellation,
workaholism.
Yeah, all of that.
I actually find it envious. I think that's why it struck me so much. Honestly,
I'm kidding. That's not what we just did. But I'm curious to know what are you excited about? So we know the general things. We know you love music. We know you love people. We know you love serving projects and being in service of others. But say a little more specifically, you master records. So what are you excited about in the game right now? Who are you excited? Who do you look to as peers and say, fuck, man, that guy's crushing it or that girl's crushing it? Or are there genres you're like, this thing is coming up or blowing up and I think maybe I want to do more of this next year than that? Or, What's pulling you forward?
It's a tough question because it's a bunch of things come to mind, not just music, but things that excite me about like the business end of things. Like I am excited that like right now, I'm going to.
Luckily, this is a long form podcast, so you can list all of them.
Cool. So I'm gonna take a left hand turn. Probably the thing that's exciting to me right now is the fact that somehow we've collectively been able to build like a business, like, and it's not just me. It's I have a team.
You want to shout them out?
Yeah, I have a Ryan is our business manager. Hector has been with me since college, and Hector Vega, and he's doing great mastering. And Philly Filizola, that's his real name.
Mm-hmm.
I call him Philly Zoloff, and then I send him a little Olaf message. It's really stupid.
Oh my god!
And then Connor Hedge is like our newest is our newest hire, and then we have Katie, the intern from APU, from the college that I went to, and my mom runs the books and keeps the lights on and stuff, and then my dad has his clients and kind of does whatever he has to. So it's kind of like we have this, that it's really interesting to me because having a business like that, like I couldn't have set out, this, just being honest, like I couldn't have set out to had what I have. I would have thought it was too impossible, or it'd have been thought it was too many things had to go right for that to work. And somehow I'm here. Somehow I have this really great young business kind of operating under me, because we service a lot of clients. Like it's not just the ones that I do directly. I do mastering with Hector, for a lot of independent stuff. I do mastering with Philly, and I work with him directly on a lot of our library and production music clients. And, Connor's just constantly trying to keep up with alternate versions. And it's just kind of this machine. And I am excited that I am where I am, because like I said, I don't think I could have set out to know. So much of my life is, when I look back, I could not have set out to do what I did.
You just adapted along the way.
It kind of became.
You wouldn't have known that you wanted it, or you would have wanted it and not believed it was possible.
Yeah, both.
Both, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. It's just that's what makes me so thankful. Like everything about my life is that way. Like the sort of family that I have. Like I just feel very blessed. And I'm excited when you see, we've gone from here to here in a decade. When I think about the future, I just get more excited, because I'm like, man, if we did this in this amount of time, it's like
we. I love that.
It is very much
it's
we.
A we.
Yeah. Every speaking about we, it's like every Instagram post I try to remember all the guys, because we're all always trying to get them credit, because it is a very we. Maybe they didn't assist on the main version, but they're the one who cranked out the clean version in 15 minutes when you called me at 9:15 p.m. Like
on that note, did you see the Grammy change? Album of the year.
People.
Everybody that touched it as an engineer, producer, songwriter
gets a statue.
That one category. We could talk about that another time.
Yeah, that's a long conversation.
Yeah.
There's like the competing feelings in me right now.
Yeah.
Mostly cool, because I want people recognized.
Yeah. We can come back to that.
Yeah, that's
but if everyone gets a participation trophy,
exactly.
It's one album. I mean, it's not.
It's a big album.
It's not thousands of albums. Everyone getting a trophy.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but I'm just.
We don't need to tangent on it now.
Yeah.
I really like the where you're going.
Yeah, it's just like I mean, and I personally just to be honest, like I attribute it to God. That's my mindset, or that's where I come from. Like, but mostly I'm just try to be thankful, because it's like I feel like if whatever got me to where I'm going, I'm just trying to be as thankful as possible and grateful in for the people around me, and I'm just looking forward to the future. So that's really what's exciting me, because I don't know where I'll end up, what I'll work on, who I'll interact with. I don't know, how my life will shape up to be, but I'm hoping that it's a continuation of where I am now. So I'm all excited about the business stuff. And as far as music's concerned, I like that before maybe 10 years ago when we started, not 10 years ago, when we started doing bigger records around 5 years ago, like the first time when we did that Macklemore and Ed Sheeran track, I was ready for my just world to be just, you do the thing and then you're like, everyone's going to hear this, they're going to see the credits, and they're going to call, and it doesn't really work that way. It's like, because this is one track, it's not that people don't call for that one track, but it's like, it takes many and many of those tracks. And it not only takes many and many of those tracks, it takes consistency of being able to deliver and being able to, and to have a sound. And I feel like I have my creative spark inside me, and the thing that I have a particular curve at which I like to approach music in terms of sonics. And it's rejected sometimes, and that's painful. But I feel like we're winning more, us together.
I agree, yeah.
And I feel like people are starting to come for that sound. And that's really exciting to me, because it's like I'm no longer forcing. I've never been the guy to force my sound on people, but it's cool to be able to do what you would naturally do.
Your taste.
Yeah, it's cool that I could bring my taste, because I'll do anything. There are records I've done that are super bright, crazy, because that's what the client wanted, and I'm not the guy to put everything. But it's cool when the economy of things is bringing things to your doorsteps that
are aligned.
That are aligned in artistically. And so I'm really excited about that. I was listening to Mariba today, just came today, and that first track, it's like there are producers that say, you can't go below this note on the 808. You just can't do it. And the whole song is 808s that are so low, like kicks that are so low.
So good.
It's just like my concrete slab in the studio right now is moving. Like it is like music that's not heard but felt. And it's like, I love that we were able there. I don't think there was a note. No, it just was. It's just natural. It's funny because she has a song called Kinfolk. I'm not sure what that word means specifically, but I think it means like probably like kinship and stuff. And it just feels like
kinfolk.
We're headed in a direction together, and we were able to come alongside of her and come alongside of her on this project, and it was a natural involvement. And this really cool sounding thing happened. And I'm hoping more and more of that. Those are the sorts of things that really make me excited, where we're able to do things that have I'm just not so into doing run-of-the-mill stuff. Like I want everything that we do to count.
But I think you're doing not run-of-the-mill stuff because you take the pain along the way so that you can do those things, that you're capable, that you've got the headroom when it comes across. And that the more times you deliver on what comes naturally, what's in your comfort zone, collectively, the two of you, John and Dale, artists hear that, A&R hear that, managers hear that, producers, and you become known for that. It becomes part of your reputation, and then they come to you for that. We talk a lot here about the engineer's reputation being primarily built on the artists they've attracted. I think that's one of the things that I've enjoyed so much about watching you guys work. I mean, the original impetus was really to eliminate dysfunction from the mix to master process, where, I was in the mix room very often over the last 20 years, and checking masters on the way back in is like a crapshoot when A&R are calling the shots on who masters. And I always thought that was strange. I'm like, well, why don't mix engineer? Why aren't people paired up more intimately, where they can iron out the mix to master process, where why does it have to be like 50-50 when things go to master, whether they're going to be diminished or made better? And, you know, so seeing you guys work together and sort of your taste and your value set evolve together. You were a natural fit to begin with, but then watching it evolve together has been really interesting. And then to see the artist, when the artist lands with the right record in the zone and you guys do it. I mean, to me, this is everything I imagined when I, you know, because I set out to establish this relationship with you when I was producing more. It was like, I don't want the dysfunction at that step, you know, and there's just so much of it. And look, I don't mean to say that record companies should not have a say or they should not master with who they want to master or that they're fucking things up. I mean, it just so happens that that's what I witnessed. But I think like the pairing of you two, your personalities, your taste, and one of the things, Dale, I'm just going to big you up for a second because it's meant a lot to me that you participated in these conversations about what was happening upstream from the mastering studio. We've had many conference calls, Skypes, whatever, sort of discussing problems, like maybe records that we were more involved on the production side. Like, how should we go about achieving this kind of thing, right? We know it's going to end up on your desk, and it's often difficult to get things loud or you know, feeling competitive. Like, what can we do upstream? So there were many times when we put our heads together about, you know, the early stages of a production, how things are mixed, and to me, I don't know any other mastering engineer who spent so much time sort of collaborating on upstream engineering, right? Without being hired to do that or anything. It was just really an investment in the relationship. It is something I've really valued.
I appreciate that.
All these years. And I don't know that I can tell you enough because there's so much that I gained so much from those conversations, and I know you did too, John.
I still do it. I still send him a listen to link, and say, "Hey, you're gonna master this. Where's it at? Like, what can I do to make your life easier before I send it to the artist? Like, what's too heavy here? What's the, you know?" And we still do that on the regular, and it's I can't be more grateful for that. I
appreciate that, guys.
You know,
yeah, I think that's. It's the people who aren't willing to do that are either complacent, like we've talked, like they don't have any interest, you know, because they're too busy or whatever, and this touches on part of the reason why I still record stuff sometimes, and I still, you know, for my own personal projects, like I'll mix something with my dad, I'll if someone at church needs something, like I'll do, you know, I'll jump in and do like help a friend out or something. But the main reason I do this is because I never want to lose touch with how hard it is to get to the mastering stage in the first place. Like, people who get pissed off about how bad something sounds when it reaches their desk have lost any idea for how hard it is, and how, like I said earlier, what a miracle it is that it is even gotten to this point anyway, you know? And so when I dive in on a mix, like to listen with you, John, or when we're having those conversations and I get insight into these, the artist is saying this, and like, it keeps me connected to the fact that man, this is a lot of times, even in the best of situations, this is really hard.
Yeah.
This is really chaotic. It is hard to get it loud when the you know, all these different things that we could list. But it just keeps me connected to the process. I don't want to be this mechanical thing over here that you just like mash you know, those things you like The thing that the guy mashes the ground beef through and it just comes out like Play-Doh. Like, I don't want to be that machine where you just take this organic substance, all this thing that people have done, and you mash it through the thing, and that's the end product, you know? Because that's a lot of times what mastering is. It's just the mashing, and then it comes out in little square cubes, you know, processed meat. That's a really gross analogy.
I have a bit of a pivot. So when
smashed meat.
When Tony was up here for the Conversations event last year, he talked about mixing. Like, when he's mixing a record, he's mixing it forever.
Yeah,
right. That's a master that lives for a master recording that lives forever. And mastering engineers are taking that mix and making it work at whatever platform it needs to go to, whether it was vinyl or CD, you know, tape cassettes, thinking about radio, you know, whatever the delivery mechanism now, streaming. Where's mastering going? What are the delivery mechanisms like? What do you see the future of in the future of mastering?
It's really unknown, because we have all these immersive things coming up, and it's baby stages. And, you know, a lot of mastering engineers even worry whether I feel it. You know, you get on these calls. Sometimes I'll have to get on these calls, and there'll be mastering engineers talking to, you know, whoever, and talking about, the industry is going to this immersive thing and no one's mastering. And it's like this clinging to, you know, we got to hold on. We got to maintain our position. And
sounds a little bit like Napster era record company.
Yeah, you can't, and you can't, the world's going to change, you know? And the thing that does have to die for someone in my position to continue to do are all outdated models and ideas of what a mastering engineer is. What if I was just the guy? I don't have a title, but Dale's the guy. He listens to a lot of music every day, a lot of stereo mixes or Atmos mixes or whatever the deliverable is. He has a really tweaked room. We can trust what he's hearing, and he's the second set of ears. Like, who can do fine-tuning adjustments, like, what if that was a thing? Like, and we don't label it. That really is the future. I am always valuable as a second set of ears, whether mastering. If mastering stopped today because of whatever, you know, mastering just stopped, I would probably be showing up to. John would probably be like, "Come on over," and
I would be hiring you on every project
because of the way you experience music, because of your listening ability.
It's another set of ears.
Your intuitions. It's developed all these years.
The music is speaking, like a particular mix is emanating multiple messages at once, and all of us here pick up on different things of those messages. You know, when that's why we do so much non-active listening. John, puts on used to put on old black and white movies or weird, you know, just whatever.
Go black screen.
Yeah, I'll put on, there's this weird shapes, you know, and my whole point thing is to get lost and to have intuitive moments where I'm not going, should I cut 200? Anyone's asking, should I cut 200? You shouldn't, because that's an active decision. All of my decisions are like, 200 needs to be cut, and I go for it, you know. So I'm just another set of fundamentally, I don't think people who are willing to adapt, who are willing to be a second set of ears, are always. Maybe the label needs a good, I don't know, whatever. It's just I'm just always the second set of ears, and this old model of mastering, mixing, like, let me dovetail into Atmos, okay? Atmos, right now, most mixing engineers are delivering directly to the label, and there is no mastering engineer.
Right.
It's because we're in a mad rush to get content onto websites.
Yeah.
So it's less about
into the pipeline.
Yeah, it's less, it's not that in most cases, people are really, really trying to do great work. There might be some people out there. There are probably, more than likely, there are people out there just trying to make a buck, like the early CD days when people were transferring cassettes to digital. No. And then that was the CD format for the next 10 years, you know, and there might be some of that as we go to immersive. But what I'm saying is, like, people don't understand that because they have these old, outdated models of mixing and mastering, like, there is no conversation for the mastering engineer because people are basing, well, is it Atmos mixing or Atmos mastering? Well, there is no Atmos mastering, so we don't have to use a mastering engineer. No, yeah, exactly. And really, when I get into a conversation with people who are mixing, like John, you know, I'm the second set of ears. Like, I have, you know, John will have a room here, and if he wants me to check and make fine-tuned tweaks, like, even though there's no technical mastering stage yet, even though there will be, I can be that second set of ears. I can do the final print. I can do the final sequencing, just like we do stereo, even though that stage in I don't know the word, in the stage doesn't exist, but really the point is having a trusted set of ears, especially because, and sorry to go on such a long tangent, but say, for instance, we're trying to kick out 7 Atmos mixes in a week or something. Really a lot of work. John's working around the clock to get it done. He doesn't want to work, not that he would work 15 hours a day because he doesn't like doing that. But say, for instance, he said, yes, I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to do 15 hours a week. I'm going to push the limits. If you're pushing the limits like that, you don't want something to go directly to the label.
Nope.
You want someone who hasn't been in here, who is fresh, because you won't be your best. Just like you said, if you're not taking care of yourself, you want to be able to hand it off to someone you trust.
You want to have the confidence that you have someone to backstop you while you're doing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, hey man, like, or even like this situation has happened, not with you guys, but with other situations. The mix is approved minus 1 tweak, okay? Mix engineer has his assistant print it. Background vocals totally distorted on this next pass. Mixing engineer wouldn't have known that if there was no mastering engineer, if there was a mastering engineer who couldn't care less about the project that the vocals were distorted, that would be the master mix that ends up getting released, and then heads roll on release day.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like the mastering engineer, or whatever we become, whatever we call it in the future, it's a trusted place because you trust the person to be detail oriented, to do his job. You trust his listening environment. It's a even though we have the same speakers, our rooms translate different. We listen different. There's like a reference level aspect to mastering. You expect them to have an as good room or better. And all these things, just like you said, it's a backstop. It's a and from one other perspective, can I go one other perspective?
Yeah.
So we talked about, like, from the label perspective. From an A&R's perspective, music making is just total chaos the whole time. I mean, if you think about the artist and notes and different producers and personalities, it's herding cats. It's like all these things. And then the A&R, the reason the A&Rs, and I'm speaking on behalf of A&Rs right now, the reason A&Rs have their mastering engineers they go to is because they know that guy can get projects over the line for me. No matter what notes I throw at him, no matter what big name is throwing a fit, because I just know that when I go to this guy, there aren't any, he gets it across the line. There aren't as many issues as when we try to use this other guy who's, whatever. Yeah. And so the mastering engineer for the label perspective is the guy who can take all of this very different. I mean, people do the craziest thing these days with productions, producers. Oh, we want this, crazy metal song on with this R&B song. Like, weird stuff happens, okay? Crazy things come down, crazy ideas get implemented. I don't know why. But you have this giant amount of data that needs to be processed and put into a fashion where everyone, the whole camp, is going to be happy. so we can get this freaking thing over the line.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and sometimes I even get scared when I have mixes coming in from different people, and it's like I know all of their expectations. I know so-and-so doesn't want his kick transients touched, but it's like 4 dB quieter than everyone, you know, all these different things. And you have to be creative and be the guy to get it across the, so I don't see, if we think of it in all these different terms, I see myself in a role and as serving a purpose. Maybe it won't be a mastering engineer title forever.
Sure.
But like I serve all these purposes to help people finish things. And I don't see that going away unless we just completely throw quality and caution to the wind.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I see mastering as sort of like the gate to the archive. So like QCing what goes into the archive or into the distribution pipeline. And the distribution pipeline, like you're saying, can change. Like if every mix is an Atmos pipeline in the future or whatever it is, in some kind of VR immersive, whatever. Even though you're no longer in this loudness war or doing the kinds of things mastering engineers have done since the 90s, since CD or whatever, that the role still matters. It matters to the people who own the copyrights because this is the equity that they build, right? This is the business. And that includes labels, songwriters, publishers, anyone who has equity in these copyrights. Having someone there who has you look at the songwriting, like the earliest parts of record making are the most chaotic, and it gets sort of more and more orderly till you get to the mastering stage, and it's like the buck stops there, whether we call it mastering or not. I think it's interesting. I think it's important for people to know that mastering is not using a certain set of tools to do a thing.
Right. Absolutely not.
And that's how it's talked about. That's how it's understood.
We touched on that before. It's like people say they master their own mix. It's like, no, you processed your mix.
Yeah.
That's not mastering.
Yeah.
And there's debates about that language, but to me that's processing. Putting a Verimu on your mix bus after, or taking your mixes and doing a thing on them, that's just processing. You can't master it because you're you. You don't have another set of ears. You don't have the perspective, which is the most important, or the objective ear. If you pretend, if you wait long enough, you can have some kind of take on it if you do it in a different room, but it's still never going to be the same as someone who doesn't have that previous relationship, that prior, all of those hang-ups, and it's that objectivity that you're talking about is huge, and I don't think it will go away. I think it's a part of the future, whatever, So yeah, I'm glad to hear you're thinking that way.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't need to hold on to what was at all. I'm fully willing to adapt, but that's never going to go out of fashion. Like a trusted friend, like if that sounds so dystopian. Dale is our trusted friend, but I mean, really that we are me and you, Rory, are trusted friends to many people. And that is what we serve as.
Yeah.
It's just we got to, the world is changing at a crazy pace. The world's, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
But the music industry is changing like crazy. Too fast for anyone to keep up, especially with all these things and immersive and format wars and all this crazy stuff. And it's like I want to stay on the forefront as much as possible. That's why we did our Atmos installation, is because I'm trying to stay on the forefront of what's coming. And Atmos is a great, it solves a lot of issues. It's doing a lot of great things. And I knew the only way for me to understand it and to be, not just be a part of it, but to be effective in it, was to build a room.
To buy in.
To plug all the stuff in myself so I understood it. And to just start doing stuff and just have fun with it. Like John just came over and we were like, let's do an Atmos mix.
So fun.
And we just had fun with it. I just kind of like said, well, I think you kind of put some stuff, this panner right here. And he just had this kind of a creative moment. Josh looks at me and he goes, I don't think I've ever seen him so happy. it was so good.
Oh, that's great.
And
that's funny.
It was just like this. And so, I mean, that's just constantly chasing that. I don't know. That was kind of a side note, but I mean, it's just.
I love that. I'm laughing now.
It's just that we're just going to continually be adapting, and
that's the thing. When I think about mixing records, and same thing with mastering, what once was it isn't anymore. And sometimes, like the Mariba project you bring up, is actually a really great example of mixing. When I got those stems, everything was mono and raw and untreated, and I got to shape the sound of it. That's the only project last year that I got to do that on. Everything else was balance is pretty much the same. Like I've talked about it, and I get a lot of DMs like with the mind blown emoji or memoji about I don't move faders. Like my faders are all at 0. I adjust outputs on plugins, and I do my gain structure in a different way with clip gain, with limiters, and controlling this output ceiling. I don't move a fader because DAWs sound better at 0. Or at least to me, it was a thing for a while, and I'm pretty sure that's still the same thing with bit depth and resolution.
Bold statement. Yeah. But anyway, carry on. You're making a point.
No, please.
No, you're making a point. I'm just kidding.
But I don't ever have a fader above or below 0, and that's my workflow because it's different than it used to be. And we're not hitting a console really hard and keeping the faders low, but we're pinning the needle and it's clipping. We now have a tool called the clipper that if you want to clip, you can shape the sound of the clip and the sound of the transients. We have new tools and we have new possibilities to do old school sounding things and tricks. And I don't want to look back. I don't want to look. I've talked about this a lot. I don't want to look at a GUI that says I'm using a thing that I'm not using. It doesn't make any sense. So as a mastering engineer, you're not always geeked about what tube gear or what solid state gear you're putting it through. Sometimes it doesn't go through gear and it's in the box because the song hits the converter and it fucking flops out and it clips in a bad way and does something negative. Like it's not a one size fits all chain that is the magic sauce to Dale, Becker and Ruairi's mastering business. It's not. It can't be that for a mixer either. We're talking about an album where there's a metal record and an R&B record and a folk record on the same album. Listen to Brockhampton. If you put Brockhampton through the same chain for every song, it doesn't sound like Brockhampton anymore. It doesn't make any sense, and that's existing in a previous world where what one is expecting from you is your job, and that's not your job anymore, and that's not my job anymore, and it feels more fun. It feels way more uncertain, and I love uncertainty because nothing is. And once you can adopt that in all aspects of life, you stop taking things so seriously. Even though I know you take your work so seriously, and so do I.
Yeah, I that's one of the things I said. The PMC did a little easing. How do you say that? Is that how you say that? A magazine.
Our little fanzine thing.
Fanzine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So they asked me, what's the worst thing that you've ever learned? And it was this idea that everything as a mastering engineer had to go through the same, it has to go through go through the stuff and then you just print it. And that worked for a lot of people. It still works for certain mastering engineers. The stuff just goes through the thing and that's what you get. But I mean, that's not, the more and more I divorced myself from that idea, and I didn't use the same thing on every record, and I didn't have this thing that I was trying, like everything went through the same thing, and I used different tools on different songs, and sometimes I do it analog, sometimes do it all analog, sometimes I do it only digital in the box. The worst thing on the planet is when someone comes to me and has an idea about what I should do or asks me to use a particular piece of gear. It's like, oh, can we hear the fair? And I'm sorry if anyone's hearing this who has done this, but it shouldn't be a thing where you come in and you're like, can we hear the Fairchild on that? Because if the Fairchild, which I know that Fairchild, the ADL Fairchild, better than anyone in the room at that point. And it's like, I would have put it on.
Oh, are you the engineer? Is that?
Yeah, I'm like the engineer.
Are you the engineer?
Exactly. But these ideas, these outdated, or even when people get upset, like, or surprised when they're like, "What'd you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I used Pro Q and Pro L." What? That's what?
Yeah. I have those.
It sounds, and I can make it sound like there were tubes and width and everything with those two tools. And sometimes the best two tools, that's the thing. And I wish that if I told someone I use Pro Q and Pro L, they didn't go, "Oh, he went lazy on it." Because sometimes I spend 2.5 hours tweaking Pro Q because if I'm in Pro Q and Pro L, I know it's going to change things very subtly, transient-wise, space-wise, in terms of how people are relating to the loud mix reference. Like, it's going to keep all the essence. If I run it through a tube gear just because I want to not seem lazy, and then I try to
wild.
Yeah, so but that's a thing.
No, I know it is.
Then I've already taken the essence away from the loud mix by running it through a tube stage or doing what I should do, and then, but it's just like, I should be able to, if you trust me, I should be able to do my job the way I see fit. Like, and so don't get worried if I spend an hour tweaking Pro Q. It's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I don't want to change the window. It's just because that's where I want to live for this song, because this is the tool that's going to get me to where I'm going.
The other way, the send everything through sounds like mastering on mute. It's just that's what it needs. You can do that, and you can have anybody do it.
Yeah,
and you can just put it through what did you call it? The meat
smasher.
The meat smasher.
I mean,
it just sounds like that you can do that without ears.
That's why interns used to be the lathe engineers. I mean, interns used to be the lowest engineer. The big wig engineers would do the mix. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the guys who were getting paid the big bucks were mixing the records, and then the kind of lowest guy on the totem pole would run it off onto the lathe. At least that's how I was told. Some studios, like, mastering was kind of like the thing. You can do it, buddy. Like, hey, little buddy. Like, why don't you go over there and lay this off onto the lathe? And we don't do that anymore. So
I'm happy to have you on my team.
Oh, thank you.
And have you say a second pair of ears. By the time it gets to you, I imagine there's 10 to 20 sets of ears on it, and there's no one I'd want to finish the last touches off than you every time. And when it doesn't happen, I though you don't know this, it's usually after a bit of a bicker, and when it doesn't happen, I am let down, and I am personally hurt on your behalf.
Thank you. Thank you.
I am.
A lot of pain. It's contagious. Everyone's getting hurt. Lots of scratch knees, little band-aids. Yeah, it's a rough time.
Making records hurts. Yeah.
Well, and there's nothing. I love. I mean, I try to stay with friends with as many mastering engineers as possible. When we were at the Grammys last year,
boring.
No, I mean, it was so weird. I sat down, and they sat all the mastering engineers down together. So I turned, and it was I was like, oh my gosh, it's Randy. And then Chris came and sat down, and there was just everyone was around me, and everyone just was so nice, so. And so I try to, and all of us do things very differently and serve different purposes. And it's there are mastering engineers who run it through the thing, and I'm not criticizing that, because that works for them. It's Big Bass had his thing. He ran it through the gear, and it got a certain sound, and that worked for him. So I'm not criticizing. It's just, for me, it's I just need to be able to do. If you're coming to me don't have a conception of me. Just let me be me and do the thing that I do.
I love that so much. Yeah,
it's like people that back to the Khalid Better thing. Hey, I need you to sound like Khalid Better. Well, your idea of Khalid Better might not be what the reality of the thing is. So let John just be John,
Let us all be us.
Let us all be us.
Hmm.
Did we cover it?
That's great.
2 hours, 10 minutes?
That was great.
Michael, you got anything over there? I know you had some audio trouble earlier. We dropped out. We got thumbs up from Michael. Michael's on the road in New York in a
very brightly lit room.
In a basement. Songs from a basement. Well, Dale, thank you for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to have a vaccinated human in the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we can look at and eat a meal with.
And
it makes it a lot
shimmy.
easier. Yeah, but it's fun to have a conversation in the room, with a guest. Of the previous Zooms guests we did were with Zooms, and except for Ryan, our first guest, which was great.
Yeah, Ryan
nice,
Lewis. Yeah.
Nice to have that eye contact and that physicality, that so much physicality. I mean, I'm looking.
I know.
There's a running joke here tonight for people who are listening about Dale's arms because they're basically the size of my legs.
Yeah.
The big guns are out.
Yeah. So we've called that back many times during dinner and will again, I'm sure. But yeah, it's great to have you. And I don't know. I don't think there's anything more to say.
Yeah, thanks for all the support and the kind of generosity and the kind of positive atmosphere that you maintain has always been really important for me.
Well, thank you.
And a great influence. And I'm happy to know you.
Oh, thank you. Happy to know you as well. I owe my career to spiders, so
no, let's not.
No. If we went back, let's. I know we're closing out here.
Now you take the time.
But there are key moments that without those key moments, whole branches of the tree would have never been. There would be different branches, but there wouldn't be this branch that I'm so happy on. And so thank you.
Means a lot, too.
All right. That is cool. Good night, people.
Till next time.
Conversations is produced and mixed by Dylan Seals. The Conversations theme was performed and recorded by the Hazelrigg brothers.